things it's doing. And Mac OS tending to invent the different parts of the operating system. They basically kind of pick and choose all kinds of things they like, and sometimes they probably pick a bit from KDE as well. Like some people argue that Windows 7 takes quite a few things which they saw in KDE Desktop and KDE 4. And anyway, in any case, the fact that we can change and we can choose is quite important. I think for sake of consistency, the proprietary vendors try to force you to do it in a certain way, and their nice excuse for justifying that is to say, well, we have to give instruction in a unified way, and we have to administer, enterprises, those big words, administrating and federating enterprises with a very consistent interface. But at the end of the day, you have to give people some individuality or some expression or an ability to adjust things to the way they do their work, because not everyone's doing the work in the same way. And sometimes you have different modes of work, and certain tasks that you do require you to have lots of windows out. And the interface being too rigid is not going to truly accommodate that. It's going to stand in your way instead of just letting you do what you want to do and the way you want to do that. I had these experiences when I sometimes do experiments and I have to have like 50 windows in a certain organization, and I have to shade them and I have to organize them because each Windows is a computer I'm connected to or a node I'm connected to in a cluster. And there is no easy way to manage this in Windows, so people try and do that, but the interface is just not flexible enough to allow you to do that. I should later on, I want to try and speak about Fedora 14 because I'm really, really impressed by the distribution. I want to say a few good words about it. But I think you have some news items or some things you've seen today.
Yeah, just a few bits and pieces. I've been busy finishing off an article on the game editor that I made a comment about yesterday on the show. So that's been put up on TechBytes, and I'm going to be messing around with that probably for a few more weeks as I sort of try it out and find its limits and possibilities. But yeah, something that sticks out today, I'll pick the first one. That's the 4chan, Anonymous, has now stopped its DDoS attack campaign, Operation Payback. Not particularly news now because obviously it hit the mainstream press when they were bringing down sites all across the web for different people that they're taking exception to. But apparently now it's been concluded, and that's going to be it until the next time. From reading between the lines, I personally think that there's been some loss of support. I remember when I covered it a few weeks back and mentioned that involving yourself or a user involving themselves in this type of attack on websites is probably not the wisest thing to do.
Did you hear about the arrest of a person who did political type of service attack on, I think, on a Republican site, or a person who was a Republican candidate, or I think it was 30 months in jail. It was quite a headline because I think it opens the door to similar action against people who apparently all they do is trying to use exploited computers and trying to overwhelm with demand a certain website. And it's always been a bit tricky, I think, finding something to convict them with. I think the laws are not up to date, but I think you know better than me.
Well, the point I made before, whilst the actions by Anonymous in regards to these DDoS were allegedly honourable, what I tried to make people aware of is that the Computer Misuse Act of 1990, certainly for UK residents, is pretty clear on what's an offence. Just to quote a very small part of it, it's dealing with unauthorised acts with intent to impair or recklessness as to impairing operation of a computer's operation. A person is guilty of the offence if he does any unauthorised act in relation to a computer. It then goes on into details exactly what, and you've got quite specific legislation there which covers a DDoS attack, in my opinion, very, very well. The reason why I was concerned for people engaging in this is obviously there was some UK sites hit. Now, if UK users were involved in that, and if that website made a complaint to the authorities... Yeah,
it's tricky. Go, sorry.
Yeah, and the legislation is there. It's probably one of the pieces of legislation that is not so much current, but it's very applicable.
It sort of assumes you can get to find the people who are responsible for it, and that's the tricky thing. Because last year I had DDoS attacks against my website. We had several waves of them, and after a few, at first you think, well, you can try and deal with it yourself and try to filter, and it took us just days to get to actually serve anything because it was just a complete mess. And I did try to phone the police, not the emergency line, but I did try to contact the police in a very calm way to try and ask them for assistance with this, because it was going on for days and they couldn't get the site up. And it was very unhelpful, and even the police wasn't sure what to do with it. It's kind of like, well, somebody's committing an offense, but it's like, well, they cannot do anything to enforce the law. And that's the tricky thing. You talk about passing these laws, but unless you can get the people, to enforce the laws or to find those responsible, you kind of have to, unless you're some very major website or a person who's very influential and has lots of friends and strings to pull, the police is probably not going to help you if you're in a situation like that.
I mean, I think some of the targets that the Anonymous were hitting were pretty big targets, certainly with the clout to be able to make a proper allegation and have the resources to back it up. Just for people's future reference, there's a part of this specific piece of legislation which says to impair the operation of any such computer or program or the reliability of any such data, to prevent or hinder access to any program or data held in any computer. Again, it's pretty specific, and whilst it's unfortunate, obviously, that a lot of people do suffer DDoS attacks and can't do anything about it, hit a big enough site with enough clout, and I think things would change considerably. With the software that was involved in this particular attack, the LOIC, Low Orbital Ion Cannon, I believe, there was no proxy involved, and users that were engaging in a swarm to attack these sites were obviously doing it under their own IP addresses, which leaves you very open to allegation and to possible prosecution, which was what I was trying to put across on the website. I expect that the fallout from this and the implications for the future of file sharing and the campaign that they were fighting will probably come out later on. We're yet to see the results of the ACS law scandal.
I should point out, before I reach the discussion about Fedora, it took me about 10 times more time. Literally, it took me 10 hours, 10 times more, something like 5 hours, to try and deal with networking issues after I'd installed Fedora. I basically tried to resolve issues to do with SSH access and things like that, until it turned out it was an ISP issue. It wasn't my issue, and I was trying to resolve a problem which I could not resolve because the ISPs are starting to block ports. And this concerns me because, the classic excuse for blocking ports is, of course, either security or file sharing. And they don't call it file sharing, they usually call it piracy. And even something like SSH, usually I do backups over the network, and overnight I do these things on a daily basis. They may assume that I'm passing files that are copyrighted, but it's just my personal files. And I've had these issues before. I'm always feeling that even if I make backups of my files, I should be viewing my traffic, my high level of traffic, and sometimes it will be like 50 gigabytes overnight passing over the network. I would be treated as like a suspect because it's encrypted traffic of obvious reasons. It contains passwords and everything like that. But anything with high quantity of transfers is these days perceived as illegal. It has to be some movie, and if it's a movie, obviously it has to be some big Hollywood blockbusters. Nobody has films of the family, of the kids, of the daughters, and they kind of assume all the film belongs to some company that's a victim. And this is an issue I have because I keep seeing these closing downs of parts of networks, of all kinds of networks, where they try to remove all kinds of protocols and all kinds of things under the allegation. While it can be used to transfer files, SSH can be used with SCP to pass your files from place to place. Well, that's naturally what you do with work. And in my case, I have to pass lots of MRI images and things like that from place to place, and it can be very large files. But they can assume I'm probably passing some media files of some company in Hollywood, and I have to